All right, let me bring in Robert. Hello, welcome to GLOSAIC. Oh, I think you're muted.
There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So just to kind of like give everyone who's watching a little bit of an intro to you, Robert is the co-founder of OpenHands AI, which is an open source agent for developers or framework for agents. Really, I'm super excited to have you in here to talk about this because we haven't we've touched upon aspects of what you are going to talk about a little bit more today, but not super in depth. So I think this is going to be really interesting. Do you want to just kick us off with like a little bit of kind of like the condensed version of the backstory of like why you started OpenHands and like what the progression from like the very first iteration and version of it was to now and what has changed?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, OpenHands, our open source project is called OpenHands. I was born about a year ago, and it started actually as OpenDevin. The video of Cognition's Devin went viral about a year ago. It was March 2024. And I saw that video, and you saw this agent that could not only write code, but it could run the code that it wrote, and it could Google an error message that came out and find a Stack Overflow article and apply that to the code and basically do the entire inner loop of development until it got to a solution to whatever problem was presented to it. And it was something that I'd been playing with stuff like this with little CLI tools that were, using ChatGPT under the hood. My co-founder, Graham Newbig, is a professor at CMU, has been working on CodeGen for many years now. And we all kind of like understood that this was possible, but just like seeing it all come together got us all very excited about this idea. It kind of really showed us like what the future of software development is going to look like. But the first thing I did, because I've been working in open source for like 10 years, is Google is dev in open source. And I was very disappointed that no, it wasn't, because any tool that I'm going to, adopt into my tool set, as part of the way that I work, I want to have a sense of ownership over it. I want to like know how it works under the hood. I want to know that it's going to be there in the long term, that nobody's going to like pull it out from under me, either with a pricing change or they get acquired or go out of business. So I immediately was like, this needs to be open source. And so my co-founders and I started working on OpenDevin, which then became OpenHands a few months later. And it started very much as like, we're just going to clone Devin kind of thing, but it's really evolved into its own thing. We're really building something that is super developer oriented, but is also attracting a lot of the research community because they see it as a way to really push forward agentic research themselves. So we've got a really healthy open source project. We've got over 50,000 stars on GitHub at this point. Close to 300 people have contributed. Just a really fun community that we've got going.
As an aside, I kind of love the cheekiness of naming the thing as like a direct like trolling instance to Devin. Kind of hilarious. I have more questions, but I know we talked, I know you want to show a little bit of kind of like how the platform works. Do you want to like screen share and we can kick it off and then we can go back to talking and then we'll check in on it?
Totally, yeah.
Great.
Let's see if I can do this. So first I'm going to share just kind of like what the blank canvas of OpenHands looks like when you're inside the UI. So you can see you've got a little chat window where you can talk with the agent, and you have got, like a file system, a command line. There's a Jupyter notebook that the agent can work in. There's a browser that it can use to like browse the web. But I'm working right now on OpenHands itself. So I'm connected to the OpenHands GitHub repo. And I think this play pause button is just like a little too off to the side here. So I'm going to ask it, can you make the play pause button more prominent by putting a gray circle around it? So this is going to kick off the agent, and we'll see, the agent will come back with its understanding of the problem. I've given a very like ambiguous prompt here. So it's going to have to like look around the repository and figure out, okay, where is this button? So it's like looking for buttons and stuff like that. We'll kind of let this sit for a little bit. It'll probably
let it simmer. We'll let it simmer. Okay, perfect. My analogy for this, when I was talking with Robert earlier, is like, it's like one of those cooking shows where you make the thing and you put the pie in at the very beginning that's already pre-made, and so at the end you're like, and look, it's been baking for an hour and a half. Okay.
While that's going to, I just want to really quickly share too. I also have this GitHub PR that is I've got failing tests on it, and so I often like working with OpenHands like outside of the UI. So I'm just going to say, at OpenHands, please fix the Python unit tests. We'll see how that does.
That's awesome.
This is a real PR, live PR. Who knows if the demo gods will treat me well here, but we'll let this run and
we'll offer some sacrifices to them. Yeah. I guess the first thing I wanted to kind of talk to you about was since this day, the theme is open source AI. What makes developer tooling particularly important to keep open source, especially regarding like longevity and ownership? Curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is like, this is going to change the way we work, right? It's going to change the job of software engineering. And I think for that change to be driven entirely by a closed source, venture-backed company or a large corporation without any kind of like input from the community, I think is a little scary for me personally. Like I want to have a say in how software development changes and what the future of software development looks like. And so it's really important to me that the community has, an alternative to whatever is out there in terms of, what's closed source. I think there's definitely a place for the closed source stuff, but I think the world really needs an open source alternative so that there's something that the software engineers who are actually doing the work have ownership over.
Totally. I have a burning question for you about this. So, I mean, I told you a little bit about this, but for the audience, for context, as maybe some of you saw earlier, like I've been using a lot of code generation products. More recently, I've been using Replit a little bit more. It's what I made the GLOSAIC website in. And it's really interesting to see how these different platforms are designed and are built depending on who the end user is that they're geared towards, whether that's someone who is like, I couldn't write a line of code to save my life. I just want to like say, hey, make this button blue and click it and it makes the button blue, to, okay, I have like a little bit more of an understanding. I kind of know what code looks like. I know how to ask for different things. I'm just not necessarily good at writing it from scratch, to like a senior developer working on like production quality code with some of these things. And my understanding of OpenHands is that it's in the latter camp. How, when designing and building a product like that for that more, I'll call it like sophisticated technical end user, what are some of like the differences between how you go about building that and like some of the other products at the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for like an end user who's just trying to like, get a game together really quickly, wants to just, do a quick prototype, something like that. You probably just want to like ship it into production, straight from the agent, just like no code review, just YOLO, get it running.
Like code review, what is that?
Exactly. So it's a very like quick dopamine hit, which is really fun to play with. And like, I love playing with tools like V0 and Lovable and those folks. I would say one of the things that really helps them too is you can have a very opinionated stack because the developer's not working with an existing code base. The AI has just like a greenfield application to work with. They can say, hey, we're going to use Postgres for everything. We're going to use React for everything. And the agent can just know exactly how it should organize the code. And you can have some more guardrails around what the agent does.
In other words, an opinion into what the user ends up working with. Exactly.
Yeah. And that way it makes it a little easier for the agent to iterate. I would say we're still in early days of kind of figuring out how you can repeatedly iterate on a code base that an agent has been building from scratch without a human in the loop. I think eventually you reach a level of complexity where things start to get weird. But the more opinion you can inject in there, the more things can stay kind of on the rail and like not go too wild. But it's a lot trickier to inherit like a big existing code base, maybe an enterprise code base that's been evolving for 10 years and start to work with that. And OpenHands is really oriented towards that task. It's a much harder task. And I would say the big difference is that the agent has to work like a real software engineer, right? It needs to open pull requests that get reviewed by a human. It needs to be able to respond to feedback on like inline comments on the code. It needs to learn over time about the structure of the code base and develop some knowledge for like, this is how I run database migrations, and this is how I look at the tests, and this is how I see if things are working. So it's a very different problem, a very different user set. At the end of the day, it's all generating code under the hood. But I think what's really important is thinking about that human computer interaction. Like, do I want the quick dopamine hit and just like ship it into prod, or do I want to like have a lot of certainty over what is going into my code base? Are these changes the right changes? That sort of thing.
Totally. Oh man, I wish we had like an hour to talk about this. Do we want to check in on the baking?
Yeah, so it is trying to start the front end right now, which is like
maybe while we're sorry, go ahead.
And push your changes to GitHub and create a pull request. Just for the sake of brevity here, it is nice to be able to just like interrupt the agent and say like, hey, you don't need to actually test these changes by looking at the browser. I did actually have a session earlier today where I actually had OpenHands running inside of OpenHands, like in an iframe inside of this window here. And it does work. It can like look inside of the browser and see what it's done, but it takes a little minute to start at the front end and get all the dependencies squared away. So that's what it's working on now.
Oh, this is awesome. I know we're at time, so I'm gonna I'll kick it over to Matt in a sec. But thank you so much for joining. This was such an interesting conversation.
Yeah, this was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day.